When someone we care about is grieving, we feel this pressure to fix it, to say something that makes it better. But here's the truth. There is no magic sentence that takes their pain away. And yet we try. We fill the silence with advice or stories or words we hope will land right, and sometimes without meaning to, we make them feel even more alone. Because grief isn't asking us to solve it. It's asking us to sit in it with them, to be present enough, quiet enough, and patient enough to let them hurt without rushing them out of it. That's the hardest part, showing up without a script, trusting that our presence matters more than our words. Grief has a way of stopping time for the person living it while the rest of the world keeps moving. And if you care about that person, you feel the gap. You want to reach across it, but you don't know how. You don't want to say the wrong thing, and you don't want to say nothing at all. So you sit there caught between your heart and your words, wondering what would actually help. This is where most of us get stuck. Not because we don't care, but because we've never been shown how to be with someone in their pain without trying to pull them out of it. Today, we're going to slow that moment down, look at it for what it really is, and talk about how to show up in a way that honors both their grief and your care for them. When you're sitting with someone who's grieving, there's a moment, and you'll know it when it happens, where your mind starts racing. You can feel the weight of their loss, and you want to meet it with something that matters. But the truth is the words in your head feel too small. They don't match the size of what they're going through. And in that moment, a part of you feels helpless. You want to make it better, but there's no sentence, no clever phrase that's going to pull them out of that place. That's where the quiet panic sets in. You start searching for the right thing to say, and if you can't find it, you feel like you're failing them. That feeling, that pressure to deliver the perfect comfort, is what trips most of us up. We confuse support with solving. We think our value in that moment comes from fixing their pain, when in reality, what they need most has nothing to do with a solution. They're not looking for you to take their grief away. They're looking for someone who will stand next to them in it. Someone who won't flinch at the weight of it. And that is a very different skill than trying to cheer them up or distract them. Grief is deeply personal. Even if you've experienced loss yourself, theirs is unique to them, shaped by their relationship, their memories, their hopes for the future. And here's the part that's easy to miss. Grief is not just sadness, it's confusion, it's exhaustion, it's moments of numbness that suddenly turn into waves of pain so sharp it takes their breath away. When we try to respond to that complexity with neat package words, it can feel like we're standing a mile away, shouting over a canyon. The connection isn't there. Sometimes showing up for someone in grief means stepping into that canyon with them without trying to build a bridge out of it right away. That means sitting in silence if that's what's needed. It means letting your hand on their shoulder or your quiet presence in the same room be enough. And that can be uncomfortable for us because silence in emotional moments feels heavy. We want to fill it. But often, it's in that quiet space where they finally feel permission to just be without having to reassure you that they're okay. There's a dynamic we don't talk about enough. When someone is grieving, they can feel the weight of other people's discomfort around them. They can sense when you want them to stop crying or when you're worried you've made them sad by bringing up the person they lost. And that pressure can make them pull back, hide their pain, or give you the "I'm fine" smile that keeps you at a safe distance. That's why the most powerful thing you can offer is your emotional steadiness, not a forced positivity, not an attempt to move them forward before they're ready, just the steady sense that you can handle being there even when they're not okay. It's also worth saying, you don't have to have experienced the same loss to offer real comfort. Empathy isn't about matching pain, it's about making space for it. You can acknowledge their hurt without comparing it to your own. You can say, "I can't imagine what this feels like for you, but I'm here," and mean it. That kind of presence takes the pressure off of both of you. They don't have to make their grief understandable, and you don't have to pretend you have all the answers. Sometimes we underestimate how healing it is just to be witnessed, to have someone notice the depth of what you're carrying without trying to measure it or minimize it. When you say things like, "I can see how much you love them," or "This is so hard and I'm not going anywhere," you're not solving anything, but you're giving them something solid to lean on. And in grief, that's rare. Most people don't know what to do, so they disappear, or they show up once, say something polite, and move on with their lives. But the ones who stay, the ones who can show up without needing to fix, those are the people who leave a mark on the healing process. Now, I'm not saying you need to be perfect at this. You will get it wrong sometimes. You will say something you wish you hadn't, or you'll miss a moment to connect because you weren't sure how. That's okay. This is not about flawless execution. It's about intention and consistency. The willingness to keep showing up even after you've stumbled. Grief lasts longer than most people realize. The support someone needs isn't just in the first week. It's in the months and even years that follow, when everyone else has moved on and they still feel the absence every day. That's when your steady presence speaks louder than any words could. The real relationship issue here is that most of us haven't been taught how to hold space for pain we can't fix. In our culture, we're rewarded for results, for efficiency, for turning problems into solutions. But grief is not a problem to solve, it's a reality to walk through. And if you can shift your mindset from, "What do I say to make this better?" to, "How can I make them feel less alone right now?" you'll find your role in their healing becomes much clearer. It comes down to this: when words feel too small, you don't need bigger words. You need a bigger presence. You need to let your actions, your consistency, and your calm speak for you. That could mean checking in weeks later with a simple, "Thinking of you today." It could mean remembering important dates and quietly acknowledging them. It could mean listening without steering the conversation away when they bring up the person they lost. Grief asks for patience. It asks for humility, the willingness to admit you can't take it away, but you're still committed to walking beside them. And if you can offer that, you give a gift most people never receive in their hardest seasons: the experience of being fully seen and not rushed out of their pain. That's the kind of support that doesn't just help them through the moment, it helps them trust again. It reminds them that even in the deepest loss, they're not invisible. They matter enough for someone to stay. And that, more than any perfectly chosen words, is what truly shows up for someone in grief. When you love someone and you see them hurting, everything in you wants to make it stop. It's instinct. You want to take their pain, find the source, fix it, and hand it back to them in a way that makes it all okay again. But some pain you can't fix. And that's one of the hardest truths to sit with. Because if you're used to being the problem solver, the steady one, the person people lean on, this can feel like you're failing. It's not failure, but it feels like it because we measure our care in results. And when there's no result to show, no better, at the end of the day, we question whether we've even helped at all. This is where being present becomes more than just a nice idea. It becomes the work. And it's harder than it sounds because presence is not passive. It's not just being in the room. It's an active choice to stay emotionally open while you stand in a space where you have no control over the outcome. That means sitting with their tears without rushing to dry them. It means listening to their fears without jumping in to reassure them that everything will be fine. It means letting them be exactly where they are, even when where they are makes you deeply uncomfortable. There's a quiet battle that happens inside of us in those moments. Part of us wants to protect them from their own feelings. We think if we can just say the right thing, distract them, or give them hope, we can pull them out of it. But another part of us knows this is their process. They need to feel it. They need to face it. And when we try to shortcut that process for our own comfort, we rob them of the chance to move through it in a real, lasting way. Being present when you can't fix the pain is a skill most of us never learned because we're taught that love is action. Doing something, changing something, making something better. And yes, sometimes love looks like that. But in these moments, love looks like staying steady while they break. It looks like holding a container big enough for their grief, their anger, their confusion, without needing to shrink it down to something you can manage. That takes emotional strength because it means you're willing to carry the weight of your own helplessness without dumping it back on them. Think about it. How many times have you seen someone try to help by telling a hurting person to look on the bright side or by comparing their pain to someone else's worst situation? It's not malicious. It's an attempt to make the moment feel lighter, to give the illusion of control. But what it really does is tell the person in pain, your feelings are too big for me. I need you to make them smaller so I can stay here. That's the opposite of presence. Presence says, your feelings can be as big as they are, and I'm not going anywhere. Sometimes presence is practical. It's bringing them food without asking what they want. It's showing up and sitting in silence while they stare out the window. It's sending a simple message, I'm thinking of you, without expecting a reply. These aren't fixes. They're reminders that they're not invisible, that their pain doesn't make them untouchable, and that someone is willing to stay close even when there's nothing to give back. There's also a patience to presence. We tend to think of emotional support as a one-time event. You show up during the crisis, you say the right things, and then life moves on. But for them, the pain doesn't clock out when everyone else does. It lingers, it shifts shapes, it shows up in waves at unexpected times. If you want to be truly present, you can't just be there at the breaking point. You have to be there in the quiet aftermath when the rest of the world has stopped checking in. That's when presence matters most, because it says, I'm not here for the drama of the moment. I'm here for you. But one of the biggest challenges in being present without fixing is managing your own discomfort. You have to notice when your urge to fix is really about easing your own anxiety. This is where self-awareness comes in. You might think you're offering them comfort, but if your comfort is designed to stop you from feeling helpless, it's not really for them. The work is to ground yourself, to breathe, to stay steady, to let the silence or the tears or the heaviness be there without rushing to escape it. It's also important to remember that presence is not about perfect words. You will not always know the right thing to say, and that's okay. What matters is that you're not pretending, you're not forcing, and you're not abandoning. A simple, I'm here, can hold more weight than a polished sentence. The sincerity behind it is what they'll feel. They'll remember that you stayed when the air felt heavy and no one knew what to do. And here's something we don't always admit. Sometimes being present will feel like it's not enough. You'll leave their side and wonder if you should have done more. You'll replay the conversation in your head and think about what you could have said differently. That's natural, but presence isn't measured by your sense of accomplishment. It's measured by their sense of not being alone. You might not see the impact right away. You might never hear them say, that helped, but your steadiness plants something deep, a trust that, even in the darkest moments, someone will stand with them. The real relationship issue underneath all of this is our discomfort with powerlessness. We don't like feeling like there's nothing we can do, but relationships are not built on control, they're built on connection. And connection can survive and even grow in moments where you can't change the outcome, if you're willing to stay in those moments instead of retreating from them. When you can't fix the pain, your presence becomes the anchor. You're the reminder that the world hasn't entirely slipped away. You're the steady ground under their feet when everything else feels unstable. And that's not small. That's not just being there. That is the work. And if you can learn to value that as much as you value fixing, you'll not only show up better for them, you'll build relationships that can weather storms far bigger than either of you can control. When someone you care about is hurting, the first thing you feel is that pull, that instinct to step in and help. You want to do something, anything that makes it better. And in that rush to help, most of us start guessing what they need. We give advice, we share stories from our own life, we try to point out the bright side. But here's the truth, the right way to support someone who's hurting almost never starts with what you say. It starts with what you see. And if you're not paying close attention, you'll miss it. Every person experiences pain differently. For one, it might show up as tears and long talks. For another, it's silence, pulling back, becoming harder to reach. If you rush in with your version of help, before you understand what their pain looks like for them, you risk offering the wrong thing. Not because you don't care, but because you're seeing it through your lens, not theirs. And that's the first shift. Support is not about what makes you feel useful, it's about what makes them feel seen. When someone is hurting, their world feels smaller. It's like the walls close in and their attention narrows to the pain in front of them. That can make it hard for them to even put into words what they need. They might not know if they want to talk about it or avoid it, if they want company or space. And that's why patience is such a big part of supporting someone well. You can't always get a clear roadmap from them. Sometimes you have to stay close enough for them to reach out without crowding them when they're not ready. There's an emotional discipline in doing that. It means resisting the urge to push them into the kind of comfort you would want if you were in their place. It means not making their pain about your need to feel helpful. And it means accepting that there will be times when they don't respond, when your text goes unanswered, when your offer to talk is met with a quiet, "not right now." In those moments, your job isn't to take it personally, it's to keep the door open so they know you'll still be there when they are ready. One of the biggest mistakes we make is trying to fill the silence with solutions. We think that if we can fix the problem, they won't have to feel the pain anymore. But sometimes their hurt isn't something that can be fixed. Maybe the loss is permanent. Maybe the situation is outside anyone's control. In those cases, solutions aren't just unhelpful. They can actually make the person feel more alone because it tells them you're uncomfortable being with them in something that can't be solved. The right way to support someone in that space is to take fixing off the table and replace it with presence. Presence means showing them through your words and actions that you can handle being with them in their pain. It's not about perfect speeches, it's about steady, reliable connection. Sometimes that's as simple as saying, "I don't know what to say right now, but I'm here." Other times it's just being in the same room, letting the quiet be okay. It's also about respecting their pace. Pain doesn't move on your timeline, and neither does healing. If you measure your support by how quickly they bounce back, you'll get frustrated and they'll feel pressured. But if you measure it by how safe they feel being honest with you, you'll find that trust grows, even in the middle of something hard. And that trust is what allows them to lean on you in the moments when they can't stand on their own. Supporting someone well also means being aware of the subtle ways we can make it harder for them. Sometimes, without realizing it, we expect gratitude for our help. We want them to notice how much we're doing, to thank us for showing up. And while that's a human desire, it's not fair to put that on someone who's in the middle of deep hurt. The truth is, they may not have the energy to acknowledge you right now. The right kind of support doesn't keep score. It's given freely, without strings attached. There's another part of this that's just as important. Knowing your limits. Being there for someone who's hurting doesn't mean you have to carry every ounce of their pain. If you burn yourself out trying to hold everything for them, you won't be able to show up consistently. Boundaries aren't selfish in these moments, they're what keep your presence steady. Sometimes that means taking a step back to rest, or admitting when you don't have the words but can offer your company instead. One of the most healing things you can do for someone in pain is to keep showing them they are still themselves to you. Pain can make people feel like they've become only their hurt, like that's all others see when they look at them. That's why it matters to remember the small things, to talk about memories you share, to laugh together when it's natural, to include them in life even when they're not at full strength. It reminds them that they are more than what they're going through, and that life outside of the pain still exists. There will be moments when you wonder if you're making a difference. You might not see their shoulders relax, or hear their voice lighten, or get the clear feedback that what you're doing is helping. But that's not always how support works. Sometimes the difference you make is simply this: they know, without a doubt, that they are not carrying it alone. And that knowledge, that they are still connected, still valued, still seen, is what gets them through one more day. The real relationship issue here is that we often confuse helping with rescuing. Rescuing says, "Let me take this away from you so you don't have to feel it." Helping says, "I can't take this away, but I can walk through it with you." Rescuing comes from fear, helping comes from love, and the right way to support someone who's hurting will always be rooted in love. the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't rush, and doesn't disappear when things stay hard longer than you expected. At its core, supporting someone well is about trust. Not just their trust in you, but your trust in them, that they are strong enough to move through their pain, and that your role is to stand steady beside them, not to carry them out of it. It's about creating a space where they can be fully themselves in their hardest moments, without worrying about whether they're too much or not enough. That's what real support looks like. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's the kind of love that stays. And when the hurting finally starts to lift, they'll remember exactly who stood still beside them when everything else felt like it was falling apart. When someone is grieving, it's natural to feel this urgency to do something, to step in and take some of the weight off their shoulders. We want to make it better, to soften the sharp edges of what they're going through. But grief doesn't work like that. It's not something you can lift from them, and it's not a problem you can solve. What people need most when they're grieving isn't a quick fix. It's not the perfect sentence or the right piece of advice. What they need is to feel less alone in a world that suddenly feels unfamiliar, empty, and unfair. Grief changes the air around a person. It slows everything down for them while the rest of the world keeps moving. The people around them still go to work, still make small talk, still plan their weekends. But for the person grieving, the loss is everywhere. It's in the mornings when they wake up and remember what's missing. It's in the quiet moments when their mind wanders. It's in the routines they can't follow anymore because the person they lost isn't there. That's the part most people on the outside don't see, how relentless grief is, how it shows up over and over when no one's watching. And that's why what they need most is presence, not just at the funeral, not just in the first week, but in the weeks and months after, when the calls stop coming and everyone else has moved on. They need people who remember, people who will show up without being asked, people who aren't afraid to speak the name of the one they lost. They need to know that the loss didn't just matter to them, it mattered to you too. The mistake we often make is thinking our role is to cheer them up, to help them get back to normal. But for them, normal doesn't exist anymore. There's a before and an after, and they're trying to learn how to live in the after. When we try to rush them through that, even with the best intentions, we end up sending the message that their pain is too much for us. That's the opposite of what they need. They need to feel safe bringing all of it. The sadness, the anger, the confusion, without worrying that it's scaring people away. Grief also has a way of isolating people. Friends might avoid bringing it up because they don't want to make things worse. Family members might stop calling because they don't know what to say. And while no one means harm, the result is that the grieving person feels abandoned at the time they need connection the most. This is where your presence can make all the difference. You don't have to have the perfect words. You don't even have to talk about the loss every time, but your consistent showing up says, I see you. I haven't forgotten. You still matter. There's another layer to this. People who are grieving often feel pressure to be strong for the people around them. They don't want to cry too much or talk too much about it because they're afraid of making others uncomfortable. That means a big part of what they need most is someone who gives them permission to let the mask slip. Someone who can sit with their tears or their silence or their exhaustion without trying to pull them out of it before they're ready. That kind of space is rare, and it's one of the most powerful gifts you can give. Sometimes what they need is to talk about the person they lost, to share a story, to say their name out loud. It can be tempting to avoid that, thinking you'll remind them of their pain, but the truth is they haven't forgotten for a single second. Mentioning their loved one isn't reopening a wound. It's showing that you remember too, that their life mattered and their absence is felt. Even a small acknowledgement can be deeply comforting because it means the person they loved isn't disappearing from the world entirely. And sometimes what they need is something entirely different. A break from the heaviness. Not because they're done grieving, but because grief is exhausting. That's why it's important to read the moment. There will be days when they want to talk and cry, and days when they'd rather sit with you and watch a movie or laugh about something small. Supporting someone in grief means being flexible enough to meet them where where they are instead of where you think they should be. What they also need most is time, and not just their own time to heal, but your time, the patience to stay with them in a process that has no set ending. The reality is, grief changes, but it doesn't go away. It becomes part of who they are. If you can accept that and commit to walking with them for as long as it takes, your support becomes a steady presence they can lean on whenever the waves hit again. There's a quiet responsibility in all of this. When someone is grieving, you don't have to take on their pain, but you do have to be mindful of how you show up. If you only come around when it's convenient, or if you disappear when things feel heavy, you reinforce the very loneliness grief already brings. But if you can keep showing up in small, simple, consistent ways, you give them something solid to hold on to. That steadiness tells them, even though this is the hardest thing you've ever faced, you're not facing it alone. It's also worth remembering that grief doesn't follow a polite schedule. There might be moments months later when something triggers it and it all comes rushing back. That's when they need people who won't roll their eyes or tell them they should be over it by now. Instead, they need someone who can acknowledge it without judgment, who understands that love doesn't have an expiration date, so neither does grief. At its core, what people need most when they're grieving is connection. The deep, human kind that says, I'm here, I remember, and I care. They need people who are willing to stay present through the awkwardness, the silence, the tears, and the long stretches of time when nothing seems to change. They need reminders that their loss doesn't make them too much, and that their pain isn't something to be hidden or managed for other people's comfort. You don't have to fix anything to give them that. You just have to keep showing up, to listen more than you speak, and to let them know in both words and actions that their grief is not something they have to carry alone. And if you can do that, if you can be that steady, remembering, unafraid presence, you'll give them something far more valuable than comfort. You'll give them proof that even in the deepest loss, they are still held by love. Being there for someone sounds simple, but it's one of the easiest places to unintentionally get it wrong. You care, you want to help, you want to be present for them in whatever they're going through. But without even realizing it, your presence can start revolving around your own need to feel useful, appreciated, or reassured. And when that happens, it stops being about them and starts becoming about you. The thing is, they might never call you out on it. They might thank you, smile, and play along, but deep down they can feel it when your focus shifts away from their experience and onto your need for validation. It usually happens quietly. You check in on them, but part of you is hoping they'll tell you how much it means. You listen to their story, but you keep thinking of a similar one from your own life to share. You offer advice because it makes you feel like you're helping, even if they never asked for it. None of these things are wrong in themselves, but when they become the center of how you show up, the connection changes. They start carrying the extra weight of managing your feelings on top of their own. And when someone's already hurting, that's a weight they can't afford. Being there without making it about you is about taking your ego out of the room, not your care, not your compassion, just your need to be seen as the good friend, the supportive partner, or the one who showed up. Because real support is not a performance. It's not about how good you look standing beside someone in their pain. It's about making the moment fully theirs, even if it means you don't get any acknowledgement for it. There's a subtle kind of self-centeredness that can creep in when we're not paying attention. You might say something like, I know exactly how you feel, and then start talking about your own loss, your own hurt, your own recovery. Your intention is to connect, to show you understand, but what it actually does is pull the focus off of them. Now they're listening to your story, reacting to your emotions, and the space that was meant for their feelings just got filled with yours. Sometimes we do this because we're uncomfortable with silence. Their pain feels too big, and we don't know how to sit in it without offering something from our own life. Other times, it's because we're trying to prove our value in the moment, to show that we've been there too, so we must know what to say. But grief, pain, and heartache aren't solved by trading stories. They're eased by feeling heard. And being heard doesn't require you to add your experience. it requires you to make room for theirs. Making it about them also means paying attention to their cues, not just your instincts. If you notice they're shutting down when you ask certain questions, don't keep pushing because you're curious. If they seem tired, don't keep them talking because you're not ready for the conversation to end. This is about meeting them where they are, not where you want them to be. Sometimes that means staying longer than you planned, and sometimes it means leaving earlier than you'd like. It's not about your comfort, it's about their capacity. It also means resisting the temptation to expect something back. Maybe you've been checking in regularly, sending messages, bringing meals. And deep down, you're hoping they'll eventually say, "You've been amazing. I don't know what I would have done without you." Gratitude feels good. But the moment you make their acknowledgement the measure of your effort, it's no longer pure support. It's a transaction. Real presence doesn't keep score. You give because they need it, not because you need to be recognized for it. One of the hardest parts of not making it about you is being okay with not knowing the impact you've had. You might never hear how much your consistency meant to them. You might not see a visible change in their mood. And that's where humility comes in. Being there for someone is not about you getting closure, it's about them having a safe place to land. If you can let go of the need to see the results of your care, you free them from having to perform gratitude for you. There's also a big difference between empathy and over-identifying. Empathy says, "I can imagine how hard this is for you." Over-identifying says, "I've felt this too, and here's how I got through it." Empathy keeps the focus on them. Over-identifying shifts it back to you. The danger in over-identifying is that you stop seeing their situation as unique. You start thinking that because you've been through something similar, you already understand everything they're feeling. But you don't. Their pain is shaped by their life, their history, their relationships. You can relate without assuming you know the whole story. Sometimes, the best way to be there without making it about you is to strip away the need for words altogether. Let your presence speak. Sit beside them. Let them cry. Let them be silent. Let them stare at the wall. It's not glamorous, and it doesn't give you a story to tell later, but it communicates something they can feel deep in their bones. I'm not going to crowd you, fix you, or pull you into my world. I'm here to hold space for yours. There's a quiet strength in showing up this way. It requires you to manage your own emotions so you're not spilling them into the space they need for theirs. It asks you to set aside your own need for reassurance so they're not in the position of comforting you. And it takes a level of self-awareness that not everyone has, the ability to notice when your presence is shifting toward being about you and gently bringing it back to them. In every relationship, there will be moments when you're called to show up like this. Moments when you won't be the center of the scene, when you won't get the credit, when your role will be quiet and almost invisible. And if you can embrace those moments, if you can take yourself out of the spotlight and keep the focus on the person who needs it most, you'll find that the connection you build in that space is deeper than anything you could create by trying to prove your value. Because in the end, being there without making it about you comes down to this: your willingness to put their need to be seen above your need to be seen as the one who showed up. That's what creates trust. That's what builds relationships that last. And that's what people remember. Not how perfectly you handled it, but how completely you let the moment belong to them.